125. And today we're going to talk some more about this long chapter on Module 3. And I'll do early presentations from students. There was one student that said they wanted to do it early, and there may be others. But let me start with the lecture. I'm going to get my Module 5 up here, which is here. There we go. All right. And that should be 2. All right, let's see. That's not what I want. Okay. Weird things are happening. All right. There, they did this. We did A, then we did B, C, D. So I should be seeing letters now. There we are. Somehow the last one is not a letter anymore. Wait a minute. What is this? All right. Maybe it's chapter... Oh, it's chapter 3. That's why things are not making any sense. Let me try again. Chapter 3. There. Now maybe I'll see what I expect to see here. See if I can make it fit in the area of the screen that is projected. There we go. That's better. And here's where you left off at D. That's what I thought. Okay. So I'm set. All right. So let's talk about vulnerabilities, threats, and countermeasures. Emanations are one risk. The Tempest Project studied this, that computers and especially the old CRT screens project information that you can pick up with a radio receiver, perhaps even a long distance away. So this meant the only way to be secure would be to be in sort of like a dark basement with metal walls all around you and no windows. And in general, this is covert channels. Covert channels are things that leak out information and you don't even know there's information being sent out. So like there can be a storage channel where you see temporary files that are stored somewhere that can be accessed by another process, or you can see a file size and not contents. There's a ton of side channels like this. You can observe encrypted transmissions over the web, and even though you can't decrypt them, you can see how big the transmissions are and deduce like what web pages people are seeing from that. And you can measure the time it takes to encrypt something and deduce something about the key or a secret from that. These are all covert channels, also called side channels, where some data is being transmitted out of your system without you realizing it or intending it to, sort of like there's a hidden bug in the room. And then there's backdoors. These are intentionally placed in software typically, or they can be filled in by malware. Maintenance hook is what I see most often, where it was deliberately put there by the developers for some reason, and they ship the software that way. So there's a secret, typically hard-coded password. This is a really bad idea, because if it was made a secret forever, it might be okay, but sooner or later somebody will discover it, and then all these people have a backdoor to get in, and that's not good. And then, of course, all the malware, viruses, worms, logic bombs, Trojans, things that infect machines. Zero-day exploits are attacks that exploit a vulnerability that is not known to the developer or to the manufacturers of security products, so there's no patch and nothing you can do to stop it, except for generic defenses like least privilege and defense in depth and such, where you might have a chance of stopping an attack even though you can't stop this exact weakness in your software. So viruses are code attachments to an executable file or a Microsoft Office document, and there's various kinds like stealth virus that hides and polymorphic that mutates. Worms propagate without being attached to a file. That's what most modern threats are because they spread over the internet. They don't rely upon you executing something. Trojans deceive you, pretending to be something good like a driver or a game, and they actually do something nasty. And rootkits are the most powerful kind of remote control software. They replace the part of the kernel, so your machine is compromised at the lowest level, and therefore they are very hard to detect and very hard to remove. One famous one was John Ruskowska's blue pill that turns your machine into a virtual machine. That's one way to look at it. Packers are pieces of malware that are intended to help deliver other pieces of malware in a staged attack. So you'd pack something, and then you'd have a decompressor put in front. UPX is a common packer, and we go through it in the malware analysis class. We use this. Logic bombs wait for a trigger condition and then do something like on a certain date, or an administrator could put this on a system to crash the servers if they're not on the payroll because they got fired, something like that. These can be very difficult to find. They're typically custom written and not detected by malware scans. very difficult to imagine how you detect them. And antivirus software is typically signature-based. It uses a database of signatures, a series of bytes it's hunting for in malware, and that has very few false positives, but the problem is it's very easy to circumvent. So they all have some degree of heuristic behavior where they try to detect suspicious behavior even without recognizing a known virus signature. And the problem with this is it tends to create false positives. If you turn it up to any significant strength, this will trigger when you're doing an innocent thing like unzipping a zipped file to install some software. So typically it's mostly signature-based, your endpoint defenses, and therefore not very effective against a targeted attack that's customized to you, but really only stopping mass attacks, where you would send the same piece of malware exactly to many people. Then there's server-side attacks, where you find a vulnerable service on the server, so the attacker will find something like a file share, then exploit it, and then hack the server to steal the data stored on the server or put malware on the server that may infect the clients. Then there's client-side attacks, where the user downloads something and it's malicious, like a PDF file with malicious code or an exe or anything like that, and then they exploit a vulnerability in the software on the client side and takes this over. This is the most common way you get in machines. You send them an email attachment and somebody runs it, and now you have control of somebody's desktop. This is typically how you enter a company. So active content on the web opens up new vulnerabilities. PHP is famous for remote file inclusion and local file inclusion. So the typical PHP system will have a name of a PHP program, and then it'll have a parameter, which is the name of the file that you're going to do something with, like display or copy, and therefore you might be able to just change that parameter to point to a different file in the same system, or even a file on some other system, so you get to run that script on an unexpected file. This is file inclusion. That's the most common vulnerability you see with PHP, perhaps after cross-site scripting. Java applets used to be fairly common. I haven't seen them in a long time. You have to install a Java update to your browser. ActiveX was Microsoft's competing product, and it was extremely dangerous. Many ActiveX controls led to compromises, and I believe Microsoft has now deprecated ActiveX, and it's not included in Edge. So both of these are pretty much historical. I don't think you're going to see them around anymore. OWASP is the company, an organization, a consortium of people that can donate their time to this. Every major company is there, and they do a lot of valuable things. In particular, they specify a top 10 list of vulnerabilities of web applications, and they have sample code and practice platforms and all kinds of things. They're very good organization for security. So service-oriented architecture is another way to do it. They often call this, these days they call it serverless, where instead of having a virtual machine running an operating system, running a program, you just have the program running in somebody else's cloud, and they're putting it on machines, and you don't really know what machines it's running on. You don't worry about that. But sounds like maybe I'm going to have somebody physically here. Maybe not. Anyway, so many apps use the same service. Services are platform independent, and they're published in a directory, so you can ask them. I think they call these things workers in Cloudflare, and all the major cloud providers have these services you can run, where you don't even have a virtual machine, you just have a service running code on one of their servers. Then there are web services that can these are various ways to send data to it. XML or JSON are just ways to format data to send it up to the web service and get it back. SOAP is another way, or REST. And WDSL is WSDL, I think, SDL. I think it should be Soft Services Description Language. This details what web services are available and how they're invoked. It's sort of a directory of your web services server. All right, then there's database security. Databases store information like addresses and credit card numbers and so on. You usually have a lot of them. And there are ways to deduce data. For example, users can perform attacks to discover information they are not authorized to have. Inference attacks and aggregation attacks are threats where you try to request low privilege data and deduce something about the high privilege data that you can't see directly. And some defenses are inference controls and polyinstantiation. We'll talk about them later, I think, more. Anyway, so a database has a primary key. As you know, if you go to City College, they give you an ID number. You go to Safeway, they give you a card. You have a Social Security number for the government. There has to be some unique way to recognize you. And the fact is, even you can't use your name because somebody else might have the same name. And when people get married, they sometimes change their name. And so, we need some kind of unique identifier. And that's what all these things are. And that's the primary key of a database. That's the unique number that you can use to refer to a record. Polyinstantiation is when two rows have the same primary key, but they have different data for each clearance level. So for the same primary key, like Social Security number, you'll have top secret data and you'll have secret data. And so people that query will see some data there, but they will only see the data they're cleared for. That's polyinstantiation. You have multiple levels of data stored with the same primary key. And this is good because it prevents these attacks. You can infer restricted information. If you're able to access low-level data, for example, if anybody who was high in security clearance in like a phone directory, you couldn't retrieve their phone number with a query at low level. All you'd have to do is query all the phone numbers and look for the missing phone number, and you'd know that must be a high security person there. And so another example, they said, if you just look at who's ordering pizza late at night, you can find out when there's a major military activity because they make everybody stay late and they order more pizza. So you have a low privilege, a low security activity like pizza that's used to deduce a high security activity like a military activity. Aggregation uses many low-level facts to deduce restricted information. So this is inference and this is aggregation. Like I said, there's similar attacks where even if you can only see the low security data, you can deduce something about the high security data from those queries. So here's some controls. If you put your pizza vendors under non-disclosure agreements, so make their orders restricted information, that would lower access to that data. Polyinstantiation is inference control, where you won't find a record missing data, you'll just see different data that's of a lower security privilege. And restricting the number of queries made in an aggregation control, where you can't do many, many queries all at once, so you can't try every possible phone number. Those are various ways to protect it. Data mining is the process of searching through a database for useful information. Credit card companies mine transactions to find suspicious transactions. And of course, advertisers mine transactions to try to find customers, potential customers of their company. All right. And this is also related to data analytics. Data analytics is trying to measure the behavior of people with their data to answer questions about them. So if you understand normal use cases, you might be able to use data analytics to detect insider threats or compromised accounts. You'll find out who is logging at a funny time of day or doing things that normally wouldn't do. So defense in depth is a generalized countermeasure for any kind of attack. You just have multiple overlapping controls. Perhaps technical controls on the network, then administrative controls like policies and procedures, and then physical controls like locks and guards. So even if somebody finds a way to penetrate one of these, like they figure out how to pick the lock, there are other defenses that might stop them from doing bad things. Then mobile devices create a new threat boundary. There used to be a thing called a trusted barrier, and the machines inside are trusted because they were the company machines running the company antivirus, and they were staying in the room, but now everybody's bringing in portable devices, so you don't really have a boundary. It's not like you have a segregation between data outside your network and data inside your network. The border is porous. This is why the government says we need to move to a zero trust model where you don't trust any area. You are suspicious of every request. So every request proceeds service from a server is evaluated to see if it looks suspicious. You don't assume that if it came from the trusted zone, it's okay. Instead, you apply some level of examination of every request before you honor it. All right, and so to protect yourself against mobile devices that might be bringing in all these bad things, you can restrict the use of mobile devices by policy. I know I'm consulting for a critical infrastructure company, and I'm using my personal cell phone, and I had to up the policy and put them under control with a mobile device management system to do that. So they require a certain level of security of the device that's used as a second factor for authentication. You can have technical controls, disable auto run. Like I say, you can run mobile device management software, which gives them some control. If I put on a forbidden app like TikTok, they will find out and delete it. And you can allow only trusted devices for various kinds of authentication, your second factor authentication, and these other forms of authentication. And countermeasures against theft. people might steal the mobile device, or it might just be lost. So the first thing you do is back up the data so you don't lose the data, and you can have full disk encryption and remote wipe so that even if they steal it, they won't be able to get the data because it's encrypted. And if you can still connect to it over the network, you can remotely wipe all the data, thus increasing the probability that the bad guy will not get the data. Now, of course, the problem is a considerable amount of devices that are lost are really just lost. Either the thief immediately disconnects from the network, or they're actually just lost in their house under a cushion, but you never get connected to them, so you can't wipe them, and you never know what happened. So having them encrypted all the time is by far the best thing to do. Anyway, let's try another Kahoot. Let me get those up. A, B, C, D, yep, we're up to E. Good. All right. Let's see if I've got them in my favorites. And I don't. I got to go here. This is chapter 3E is what we want. There it is. All right. Oh, maybe a problem with this number again. That should work. Okay, good. All right, let's give it a shot. All right, so what vulnerability does the FBI want to add to iPhones? Law enforcement everywhere wants a backdoor. They want to be able to send a court order to Apple and say, tell us what's on this phone. And Apple is very vigorously resisting that. All right, what threat destroys a system on a certain date? That's a logic bomb. Some condition, like a date, comes by, and then it does some kind of undesirable activity. All right, which language tends to have RFI vulnerabilities? What's that?
Anyone doing presentation today?
Yeah, probably. They haven't talked to me yet.
I'm ready.
Good.
I have nothing else.
Good, okay, that's fine. Good. I'm going to do a lecture first. We'll do them after that.
Sure.
All right. Let me start this so you can see the screen anyway. All right, so, all right, and that's PHP has remote file inclusion. All right. All right, so which organization has the top 10 list of web vulnerabilities? All right, that's OWASP. All right, which attack searches a large database for useful information? Oh, I forgot them in my car. I have to get out. I apologize. Yeah, that's all right, yeah. All right, and that's data mining. All right, so let me just record the winners. Right, you have to tell me your real name if you want your points.